She was left with nothing during the divorce, but turned everything around and stunned everyone. The wedding was held in a pristine hall filled with crystal chandeliers and polished marble floors, with guests dressed in their finest, raising champagne glasses in celebration. It looked like a fairy tale. But for her, the fairy tale had never begun. From the moment she walked down the aisle, there was a chill in the air masked by expensive perfumes and hollow compliments. Her husband, always charming in public, had whispered in her ear, "Just remember your place, all right?" as they posed for pictures. It was supposed to be the happiest day of her life, but all she felt was a quiet dread, as if she was stepping into a contract, not a marriage. She had loved him. That was the hardest part. She had believed in him, stood by him when he was just starting his business, and sacrificed more than she ever spoke about. But somewhere along the way, love had turned into obligation, and respect had faded into entitlement. At first, she thought it was just stress, the pressure of building a future, but as the months passed, the comments became sharper, the control more suffocating. Her thoughts, her desires, her voice, none of it seemed to matter anymore. And while guests at their parties toasted to their perfect union, she sat silently beside a man who only saw her as part of the decor. The house they moved into after the wedding was massive, a 5-bedroom estate with high ceilings, a wine cellar, and an infinity pool overlooking the hills. It should have felt like a dream, but it was hollow. The rooms echoed with silence, decorated by designers, not by sentiment. She had wanted to hang family pictures, create a reading nook by the window, maybe even plant herbs in the backyard. But each time she suggested something, he'd laugh and say, "This isn't a farmhouse. Leave that peasant stuff behind." So the house remained cold, beautiful, and lifeless, just like their relationship. She had tried to make it warm. She cooked meals with care, even if he barely touched them. She waited for him at the table, often alone. His work dinners, his meetings, his sudden business trips, there was always an excuse. The one room she felt some connection to was the laundry room. It was the only place he never entered, the only space that felt hers. While she folded clothes, she'd hum songs from childhood, pretending for a moment that she belonged somewhere, that she wasn't just an ornament in a gilded cage. Sometimes she'd open the window just to feel the breeze and remind herself the world outside still existed. It wasn't just the silence or the absence that stung, it was the way he made her feel invisible in their own home. He'd interrupt her when she spoke, dismiss her ideas with a condescending smile, and constantly remind her of the life he claimed to have given her. "Don't forget where you came from," he'd say after charity galas where she was paraded like a showpiece. "You'd be nothing without me." The words stung more than he ever realized. She had walked away from her career to support him, left her parents' modest but loving home to be his wife, and poured her soul into their shared life, only to be told she was disposable. And yet, she stayed. Because that's what she thought love meant: compromise, patience, endurance. But compromise felt more like surrender, and endurance turned into silent suffering. He controlled the finances, her wardrobe, even who she could be friends with. When her best friend from college came to visit, he told her not to open the door. "We don't associate with people like that anymore." That was the first time she realized she had no one left. He had isolated her so gradually that she hadn't noticed until it was too late. She was lonely in a house full of luxury, imprisoned behind designer curtains and marble floors. She barely recognized herself anymore. Looking in the mirror one morning, she saw tired eyes, perfect makeup hiding deep sadness, and a smile that had become mechanical. The woman who once spoke with conviction and chased dreams was now quiet, hesitant, unsure of her own thoughts. She remembered how she used to love painting, how she could lose herself in colors and canvas. But now her days were filled with empty routines, yoga classes she didn't enjoy, lunches with wives who only talked about handbags and gossip, and long hours of waiting for a husband who never came home on time. Her world had shrunk to the boundaries he set. She wasn't allowed to work, because he claimed it would make him look like he couldn't provide. When she suggested taking an online course just to keep her mind active, he mocked her. "What would you even do with it? Learn how to bake better cookies?" He laughed at his own joke while she forced a smile. Inside, she was unraveling. Her dreams were fading, her voice was disappearing, and a numbness had taken over, a numbness she mistook for peace, because at least numbness didn't hurt as much. To outsiders, he was charming, a successful entrepreneur, always polite, always smiling. He knew how to talk to people, how to make them feel special, how to manipulate a room. No one would ever believe he was anything but the perfect husband. He gave her jewelry on anniversaries, posted sweet messages on social media, and always held her hand at public events. But at home, those hands never reached for hers. Behind that smile was a man obsessed with control, with keeping everything exactly as he wanted, including her. At charity events, he'd whisper instructions before they entered the room: "Don't speak unless spoken to," or "Smile more, people notice when you look miserable." She followed his script like an actress in a play she never auditioned for. One night, during a dinner with investors, she mentioned she had once studied architecture. He interrupted immediately. "She means she doodled in college. Nothing serious." The room laughed. Her face burned. That night, she cried in the shower for over an hour, careful not to let the water run too loud. She didn't want him to know she still had emotions he hadn't yet destroyed. It was a Tuesday morning when he placed the documents on the table, right next to her untouched coffee cup. "Sign these," he said coldly, not even looking at her. She stared at the stack of papers, her hand trembling slightly. No conversation, no explanation, just legal terms and a cold dismissal of everything they had lived together. She opened her mouth, but no words came. The man she had sacrificed so much for was calmly sipping espresso, already on his phone making business calls as if erasing her from his life was a minor task on his to-do list. When she finally found her voice and asked why, he shrugged. "You're just not the woman I married." He listed reasons like lack of ambition, not keeping up with his social circle, and fading charm. Her heart shattered in slow motion. He had replaced love with judgment, and now he was throwing her away like an accessory gone out of style. But the final blow wasn't his cruelty, it was when he said, "I've already spoken to my lawyer. You're not entitled to much. After all, you didn't work." The man who once vowed to protect her now saw her as a liability to eliminate. In court, she sat silently beside her appointed attorney, who was no match for the aggressive legal team her ex had hired. The judge barely glanced in her direction as her ex-husband's lawyer painted her as a woman who had contributed nothing, who had lived in luxury without earning it. "She didn't bring in income," he stated. "She doesn't deserve alimony. She has no dependents. She chose not to work." Each sentence felt like a dagger. The courtroom, filled with strangers, became a stage where her years of care, patience, and silent suffering were rewritten as laziness. She tried to speak, to explain how she had supported him emotionally, how she had managed their home, kept up appearances, and sacrificed her own goals. But each attempt was met with objections, legal jargon, and condescending smiles. The final ruling left her stunned: no spousal support, no property, no share of the business she had helped build from the shadows. She walked out of the courthouse that day with a manila envelope of final papers and the echo of his words ringing in her ears: "You don't deserve anything." She had never felt so small. In the days following the divorce, she reached out to friends she thought she could lean on. Some never answered. Others responded with stiff, awkward messages that clearly signaled distance. A few tried to sound sympathetic but said things like, "I don't want to get involved," or "I hope you understand, but we still have ties with him." It was as if her social life had been built on his image, not on real connections. The invitations to brunches, charity events, and even casual dinners disappeared as quickly as her place in his world. The loneliness cut deeper than the financial loss. She realized she hadn't just lost a husband, she had lost an entire network. These people who once called her a queen at galas now avoided her eye at the grocery store. And when she passed one couple she had dined with monthly, she heard the woman whisper, "She looks different without the makeup." Her existence had become a cautionary tale in their circle, proof of what happens when you lose your status. For the first time in her life, she understood what it felt like to be invisible. The condo association sent a polite but firm letter. She had 30 days to vacate. The unit was in her ex-husband's name, and he wasted no time reclaiming it. With limited savings and no income, her options were grim. She found a small basement apartment on the outskirts of the city, moldy corners, dim lighting, and barely enough space for a bed and a table. The first night, she lay on the floor wrapped in an old quilt, the silence screaming around her. She no longer had marble floors or ocean views, just a leaking faucet and a flickering light bulb that refused to be fixed. And yet, in that basement, something began to shift. With no one to impress and nothing left to lose, she found a strange sense of honesty. No curated life, no perfect smile, no expensive dinners to fake happiness. Just raw, aching truth. She started writing in an old notebook, listing every dream she had once buried. Architect. Writer. Teacher. For the first time in years, she asked herself, "What do I want?" The answers were hesitant but sincere. And as she watched sunlight filter through the tiny window one morning, she whispered to herself, "This is not where it ends." The electricity bill had gone unpaid for too long. One night, the lights simply didn't turn on. She sat in darkness, wrapped in a coat, candles casting shadows across the peeling paint on the walls. But in the silence, surrounded by cold and uncertainty, her mind traveled back to something she had always loved, design. She remembered how, in college, she used to draw layouts of buildings, dream up community spaces, sketch details others didn't see. Her heart beat faster. That passion hadn't died, it had only been buried. She found her old laptop in a box of things she had managed to keep. It was slow, the screen cracked, but it turned on. She searched for free online courses, started watching lectures with the limited Wi-Fi she borrowed from the cafe upstairs. Nights became her time to rebuild herself in secret. She studied, took notes, and began drawing again. With the help of borrowed light, she was slowly reclaiming her future. The world that had cast her out had no idea that the woman they left in the dark was learning how to rise. It was a rainy afternoon when she saw the note taped to the community board in the building's lobby, local nonprofit seeking part-time administrative help. No experience needed, flexible hours. Something inside her stirred. She hesitated, she hadn't worked in years, didn't have a resume, didn't even own professional clothes anymore. But something about the simple wording of the flyer called to her. She dialed the number written in black marker, her hands trembling as she waited for someone to pick up. A soft, kind voice answered. "We're glad you called. Can you come in tomorrow?" She arrived wearing the plainest outfit she owned, clutching a folder with a handwritten list of her skills. The building was old, but welcoming. Inside, she was greeted by a woman named Carmen, who offered tea before even asking about her background. For the first time in a long time, she felt like a person, not a label. The interview was informal, more of a conversation. Carmen asked, "Why do you want to work here?" She looked down for a moment and said, "Because I need to feel useful again." Carmen smiled and replied, "That's exactly what we need, people with heart." The job at the nonprofit was part-time, barely enough to cover bills, so she applied for other opportunities. One application led her to a corporate consulting firm with a glitzy office downtown. She knew she didn't fit in the moment she stepped through the glass doors. Everyone looked polished, expensive, rehearsed. Still, she sat confidently in the waiting area, hopeful. The receptionist scanned her outfit and gave a smirk. "You're here for the executive assistant role?" she asked, eyebrow raised. "Yes," she replied calmly, though her cheeks burned. The interview was worse. One of the managers, young, overly confident, flipped through her file and asked, "So, what exactly did you do during those 10 years at home?" Her response about home management, organization, budgeting, and volunteer coordination was met with a chuckle. "So, you were basically unemployed." The other interviewers didn't laugh, but they didn't stop him either. She walked out of the building with her dignity intact, but barely. On the elevator ride down, a tear escaped. Not from rejection, but from the realization that to them, years of sacrifice meant nothing. A week later, at the local grocery store, she heard a familiar laugh echo through the aisles. Turning a corner, she came face to face with Bianca, the wife of one of her ex-husband's business associates. Bianca had always spoken with a tone dipped in honey and poison. Well, she said, examining the plain loaf of bread in the cart. "Didn't expect to see you shopping here." Her voice was light, but her eyes were sharp. "I guess alimony isn't what it used to be," she added with a smirk. The words stung, not because of their cruelty, but because of their truth. For a second, she considered walking away. But then, something inside her refused. She looked Bianca straight in the eye and said, "At least I paid for this with my own money." The expression on Bianca's face shifted, almost imperceptibly. She wasn't used to resistance. "Well," Bianca replied, adjusting her silk scarf, "some of us were never meant for this kind of life." To which she responded, "No, Bianca. Some of us are just learning how to survive it." That night, she didn't cry. For once, she felt proud. Back at the nonprofit, she stayed late one evening, helping organize files for an upcoming fundraiser. Carmen walked in with 2 cups of coffee and sat beside her. "You have a calm strength," she said. "But I see something else, potential." Confused, she asked what she meant. Carmen explained she used to work in corporate marketing but left after a toxic work culture nearly broke her. "I rebuilt my life through this organization. But I never lost my knowledge, I just use it differently now." Carmen offered to teach her basic digital tools, design software, presentation planning, even branding strategies. At first, she was hesitant. She hadn't touched a spreadsheet in years. But Carmen was patient and clear. Every evening they worked together, her confidence grew. One night, Carmen looked over at her and said, "You've got more than potential. You've got vision. You just forgot how to use it." In that small office with flickering fluorescent lights and secondhand chairs, she found something far more valuable than money, someone who believed in her when she no longer believed in herself. Under Carmen's guidance, she began learning everything from scratch: social media planning, project management, proposal writing. The learning curve was steep, but each hour at the nonprofit became a stepping stone back into herself. She started waking up with a purpose again, and when she walked into the office each morning, the burden on her shoulders felt lighter. Her hands, once used only to clean and fold, now typed reports, built project plans, and helped design flyers that were praised by the team. For the first time in years, she was building something with her own name on it. Carmen introduced her to a local women's network that met twice a month. It was a room full of entrepreneurs, creators, and professionals, some starting over just like her. She listened to their stories, took notes, asked questions. Slowly, she began to speak too, sharing her insights, even her story. The women didn't flinch when she said she had been through a bitter divorce or that she had lived in a basement with no power. They nodded. Some even held her hand. It was then she realized her pain wasn't a weakness. It was her strength. With her new skills and growing confidence, she took a leap. She registered a small consultancy under her name, focusing on branding for small businesses and nonprofits. Her first client came through Carmen, a struggling bookstore that needed help attracting foot traffic. The budget was tiny, but she poured herself into the project like it was $1 million account. She redesigned flyers, cleaned up their social media, and even helped rearrange the display window. Within a month, the store saw a noticeable uptick in customers. For the first time in years, she received a paycheck with her own name on it. It wasn't much, but when she deposited it, her hands trembled. It felt symbolic, as if the world was telling her, "You're back." She stuck the receipt to the wall of her apartment as a reminder that she wasn't invisible anymore. Every night, after client work, she studied marketing trends and watched online lectures. Her business didn't grow overnight, but each tiny win, each thank you email or repeat client, added a brick to the foundation she was carefully rebuilding. The bookstore's success led to referrals. Her second client was a family-run bakery that had never used digital platforms. She met with the owner, a warm elderly woman named Rosa, who admitted she didn't know how to make things go viral. Together, they crafted a cozy brand story, shared old family recipes online, and organized a weekend event. The bakery sold out in hours. Customers flooded the tiny space, many saying they had never even known it existed before the posts went live. Rosa hugged her tightly after the event and whispered, "You've got a gift." That simple phrase lit a fire inside her. Word spread quickly in the small business community. Soon, she found herself booked for consultations, helping others bring their ideas to life. She still lived in that small basement apartment, still rationed groceries, but now her days were full. Her calendar was filled with real purpose, her inbox with opportunity. People were finally seeing her, not as someone's ex-wife, but as a professional in her own right. Among her growing clientele, a quiet cafe owner named Jerome reached out. His place had great coffee and charm but sat nearly empty most days. She spent hours there, studying the vibe, talking to staff, and watching patterns. She helped him revamp the brand, shoot a heartfelt video telling his family's story, and promote a series of late-night jazz nights. One clip went viral locally after a food blogger shared it. Within days, the cafe had lines out the door and bookings for weeks ahead. Jerome was overwhelmed and grateful. He credited her in interviews, even featured her in a blog post titled "The Woman Who Brought My Cafe Back to Life." She blushed reading it, unsure if she deserved the praise, but deep down, she knew she had earned it. Every project she took on reminded her that she was capable, creative, and strong. The cafe's success opened even more doors. Her email list doubled overnight, and she received her first request to speak on a small business panel. The woman who was once told she wasn't worth anything was now being asked to teach others how to build. When the invitation to pitch at a regional small business summit arrived, she almost deleted it out of fear. The event was filled with seasoned entrepreneurs, marketing executives, and venture capitalists. She wasn't sure if she belonged. Carmen insisted, "You're exactly who needs to be there. You've lived what they theorize about." So she prepared a presentation that told her story, not of failure, but of resilience, branding with empathy, and building trust through authenticity. On the day of the event, she wore her favorite thrifted blazer and walked on stage with trembling hands. As she spoke, the room fell silent. Her voice didn't shake. She shared how being underestimated had become her fuel, how helping others rise gave her the strength to do the same. People leaned in. Some nodded. A few wiped tears. When she finished, the applause was thunderous. Strangers lined up to shake her hand. One investor said, "That was the most honest pitch I've heard in years." She stepped off that stage feeling 10 feet tall. The world that had once looked down on her was now standing to applaud. The summit was being live-streamed. As she stood chatting with a group afterward, someone tapped her on the shoulder. "Excuse me," a voice said. She turned and froze. There he was. Her ex-husband. In a sleek suit, standing beside his new wife, who held her phone with the screen still open. They hadn't expected to see her, certainly not like this. The new wife blinked, then whispered something in his ear. "That's her?" He didn't respond. He just stared, expression unreadable. She held his gaze for a moment, then calmly turned back to her group and continued the conversation. She didn't need to say anything. Her presence said it all. She was no longer the woman he had discarded. She was someone new, someone who had risen, stronger and brighter than before. And as she walked away from them that evening, she realized she didn't feel anger. Not pity. Just freedom. The morning after the summit, her inbox was overflowing. Invitations for interviews, proposals for collaborations, and messages from small business owners across the country asking for her guidance. She sat at her small kitchen table, the same one she had once cried over, now covered with opportunities. She didn't rush. She read each message carefully, responding with sincerity, making sure to prioritize those who truly needed help. She hadn't done this for fame, it was never about recognition. But the world had finally noticed her, and for the first time, it was for who she truly was. Among the emails was a partnership offer from a well-known startup incubator. They wanted her to lead a pilot program to mentor women re-entering the workforce after personal setbacks. The concept hit her hard. It was her story, women silenced, belittled, cast aside, and yet still standing. She accepted without hesitation. This was more than work, it was purpose. She was no longer surviving. She was lifting others as she climbed. The woman once dismissed as just a housewife was now shaping the futures of dozens of others just like her. Months later, an unexpected letter arrived in a cream envelope, embossed with gold lettering. It was an invitation to a black-tie charity gala hosted by her ex-husband's firm. She stared at it in disbelief. Her first instinct was to throw it away, but something inside her paused. She wasn't sure if it was pride, defiance, or something deeper, but she knew she had to go. Not for revenge, not for spectacle. For closure. She wanted to walk into that room and feel nothing. That would be her triumph. She spent days preparing, not obsessing over her look, but choosing the version of herself that felt most authentic. She wore a deep emerald dress, elegant but understated, and pinned her hair in a simple twist. As she stood before the mirror that night, she whispered, "You're not going for them. You're going for you." When she arrived at the venue, the valet opened her door with reverence, and all eyes turned as she walked in, graceful, composed, unbothered. She didn't need to announce who she was. The room already knew. She moved through the gala with calm confidence, exchanging greetings, shaking hands, smiling politely. Conversations paused when she passed. Some whispered. Others stared. But she didn't shrink. She held her head high. Then, near the bar, she saw him. He froze mid-sentence when he noticed her. His new wife clutched his arm, tense. He took a hesitant step forward, clearing his throat as if trying to find words. "You look different," he finally said. "Do I?" she replied, her tone neutral. "I suppose losing everything helps you find what really matters." There was no rage, no sarcasm, just truth. His eyes searched hers, perhaps for remorse or vindication. But there was nothing left for him to claim. She turned away, leaving him standing in the same silence he had once left her in. That night, she danced to a slow jazz tune under the dim lights. Alone. Not waiting for a partner. Not seeking approval. The red dress flowed around her like fire, and for the first time in years, she felt truly whole. Near the end of the night, the MC called her name. She hadn't expected to speak, but someone on the board had submitted her story for recognition. She walked to the stage slowly, heart steady, and took the microphone. The room, filled with polished powerhouses, grew silent. She told them about the invisible work of women, work that didn't show up on resumes but built lives. She spoke of falling, not once, but over and over, and how standing back up wasn't an act of luck, but of will. Her voice didn't waver. She didn't name names. She didn't need to. Her words sliced through pride and performance, reaching the quiet places people try to hide. She ended with a soft truth: you can lose everything and still find yourself. Sometimes, especially then. The applause was long, not polite but genuine. A few stood. Others dabbed their eyes. But in the corner, her ex remained seated, staring at the woman he no longer recognized. She smiled, not for him, but for herself. After the gala, as guests began to leave, he approached her again, this time alone. "Listen," he began, voice low, "I've been thinking. Maybe we could collaborate somehow. You've clearly built something real." His face was practiced, almost rehearsed, like it had always been in boardrooms. She stared at him for a moment, astonished. After all the years, the silence, the condescension, now he saw value in her. Not love. Not regret. Just opportunity. He hadn't changed. He had only recalculated. She smiled, tilting her head slightly. "You can't be serious," she said softly, not with spite, but clarity. "You told me once I was nothing. Now, I'm finally something, and I did it without you." His face faltered. No anger. No defense. Just realization. She turned and walked away, heels clicking on marble floors, leaving behind not just him, but everything she had once believed she needed. That chapter was closed. And the next was hers alone to write. In the days following the gala, news of her speech and presence circulated quickly. Articles were written, social media posts shared her story, and her name became synonymous with resilience and reinvention. But not all attention was welcome. Her ex-husband's firm sent a formal proposal, a joint venture between her consultancy and their new branding division. The offer came with lucrative numbers and promises of influence. It was everything she had once dreamed of, except now, it meant nothing. She stared at the contract, then gently closed the folder without reading further. When her assistant asked if she would consider negotiating, she shook her head. "Some partnerships come with too high a price," she said. She sent a handwritten note back to the firm, "I built this alone, and I'll continue that way." It wasn't revenge, it was clarity. She had learned to distinguish between genuine respect and strategic convenience. The person they once discarded was now too valuable to be bought. Her growth wasn't something she was willing to sell back to those who once doubted her worth. Weeks later, her face appeared on the cover of a regional business magazine, smiling beneath the headline, "From Forgotten to Fearless, the woman who rewrote her story." Inside was a full feature chronicling her journey, from the quiet woman erased by a bitter divorce to the founder of a growing consultancy reshaping local business. She read the article with careful eyes, tracing each sentence like it belonged to someone else. But no, it was her. Every line, every photo, every quote reflected a truth she had long kept buried. The article was pinned up at the nonprofit office, where staff cheered as she walked in. Carmen hugged her with quiet pride, and even Jerome from the cafe dropped off pastries with a note that read, "To the woman who made the rest of us believe again." She saved a copy of the magazine in a drawer, not as a trophy, but as proof, for the days when doubt crept back in. She didn't need fame, but the visibility meant that others like her, those still in the middle of the storm, might see a way forward. On a quiet Sunday morning, she drove to the neighborhood where her old home still stood, the one she had once been forced to leave with nothing but a suitcase and a paper envelope. It was up for sale now, listed at a high price, staged with artificial flowers and furniture too perfect to be lived in. She parked across the street and watched from a distance, waiting for a wave of sadness to hit. But it didn't. All she felt was distance. That house, once a symbol of status and control, now felt like a museum of a past life she no longer belonged to. She smiled faintly, thinking of the nights in the basement apartment with no electricity, of Carmen's gentle guidance, of jazz music in the cafe, of standing on stages and being heard. That house had once represented everything she thought she needed to be whole. But standing there now, in her own shoes, on her own path, she understood, her real home was never made of bricks or chandeliers. It was made of strength, earned inch by inch. And it traveled with her, wherever she went. That night, she stood before her mirror, the same one that once reflected a woman she barely recognized. The woman staring back now had the same face, the same eyes, but everything else was different. There was calm in her posture, quiet confidence in her expression. She touched her collarbone and took a deep breath. No makeup could fake what now radiated from within, self-worth, hard-won and unshakable. She smiled, not out of vanity, but out of recognition. She whispered to her reflection, "You did it." Not loudly, not triumphantly, but with reverence. Because it hadn't been easy. There were moments of despair so dark she thought she'd never find her way back. But she had. Not because someone rescued her, but because she chose not to stay broken. She ran her fingers over a small framed photo nearby, her first client, the cafe, her first business card. And with each memory, she knew, she didn't just survive, she transformed. Months later, she was invited to speak at a public high school, part of a community outreach program for young girls interested in entrepreneurship. As she stepped into the classroom, she saw rows of faces, some eager, some shy, some quietly wounded. One girl raised her hand after the talk and asked, "How did you survive it all?" She paused for a long moment, then replied, "Because even when no one believed in me, I decided to believe in myself." And that was enough to begin. After the session, a few students approached, sharing their dreams and fears. One whispered, "I think my mom's going through what you did." She knelt beside the girl and said gently, "Then she's braver than she knows." As she left the school, she walked beneath sunlight breaking through the clouds, her bag slung over her shoulder, her steps steady. She no longer needed to prove anything to anyone. Her story had already spoken. And now, it was lighting the way for others to find their own.